7 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw their faces, since my life imploded in a way that no one prepares for. Walking into my father's funeral, I wasn't entirely sure what I was expecting. A polite nod from a distant relative, maybe a handshake from someone pretending to care. But what I didn't expect was the chill that shot through my spine the moment I stepped inside and saw them. Tyler and Madison. The two people who had torn me apart like it was some kind of sport. The chapel was thick with silence, that kind of heavy, suffocating quiet that presses against your chest. Elise gripped my hand a little tighter as we made our way down the aisle. Her presence was my anchor, graceful, composed, effortlessly elegant in her black dress. She didn't know them, not really. She only knew the scars they left behind. Tyler spotted me first. He was dressed like he always had been, expensive suit, smug expression, like the world owed him something and had already paid in full. His eyes narrowed slightly, but his posture didn't change. He didn't stand. He didn't offer a nod. Just watched, like he was waiting to see if I'd trip over the carpet and embarrass myself. Then Madison turned. If I could have bottled the expression on her face, I would have. That split second of shock, recognition, and then that damn smirk slithering back across her lips like it had never left. Her eyes flicked over to Elise and then back to me with a look that said everything she didn't have to say. She stepped forward, a little too close for comfort, the scent of expensive perfume wrapping around her like smoke. "Well," she said under her breath, just low enough for only me to hear, "I guess I won, right? You're still poor." Her voice was sweet poison, wrapped in silk. The kind of voice that once whispered "I love you" when she thought no one else was listening. And now? It was nothing but venom. I didn't flinch. Not even a twitch. I didn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I looked her dead in the eyes, then slowly turned my head toward Elise. She was standing there, patient, radiant, without an ounce of insecurity in her. And I said, loud enough for Madison to hear clearly, "Madison, this is my wife, Elise. She's a cardiac surgeon at St. James. We met while I was guest lecturing at the university." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was surgical. Precise. Cold. Madison's mouth parted slightly, her expression suddenly unsure. She looked at Elise like she couldn't quite process what she was seeing, as if Elise's presence broke every story she had told herself about me over the years. I didn't wait for her to respond. I stepped past her, guiding Elise with me. We found our seats near the front, and I could still feel Madison's stare burning into the back of my head like she was trying to rewrite the moment in her mind, trying to make it make sense. Tyler didn't say a word. He just kept that mask of indifference glued to his face, but I saw the flicker of something else, discomfort, maybe even regret. Funny thing about funerals, everyone pretends to be mourning, but deep down, they're all just doing math. Who showed up, who didn't? Who's looking better, who's winning? And in that quiet, judgmental room, it was clear something had shifted. I hadn't come for revenge. That's what made it work. I came for closure. I came because, for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to stand in the same room as them. I wasn't the man they broke. I wasn't the abandoned fiancé, the black sheep of the Callahan family, the guy who got pushed out when he stopped being useful. Elise reached over and adjusted my tie slightly. Just a soft, absent-minded gesture. But it was everything. It was the kind of love that didn't need to be loud or performative. Madison saw it. She felt it. And in that moment, I knew she realized something she would never admit out loud: she lost. Not because I was rich now. I wasn't. Not in the way Tyler was. But because I had peace. Because I had rebuilt something better from the rubble they left behind. And nothing she could say would ever touch that. At 28, I thought I had my life figured out. I was a high school history teacher in Eugene, Oregon, pulling in $43,000 a year, which wasn't much, but it was enough for the life Madison and I had built. We weren't flashy people. Our nights were spent curled up on the couch watching whatever was trending on Netflix, trading takeout for home-cooked meals when we needed to save, and clipping coupons like it was a weekend ritual. Madison worked as a dental hygienist, solid, steady work, and between our two incomes, we were scraping together enough to dream about a down payment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, and it felt safe. Comfortable. Real. Madison had grown up rough. Her childhood was one long string of unstable addresses and empty refrigerators, and while she didn't talk about it much, I could see how it shaped her. She needed security like she needed air. Stability wasn't just something she wanted, it was the thing she clung to like a life raft. I understood that, respected it, and tried every day to give her a sense of something dependable. Every lunch I packed, every late-night grading session I dragged myself through, every little gesture, it was all in service of that vision we had together. For a while, it worked. We were saving, slowly. We had a wedding date circled on the calendar in blue ink and a venue picked out that didn't break the bank. Madison had already found a dress she liked, simple but elegant, and we were spending weekends driving through neighborhoods pointing out houses we could maybe afford in 5 or 6 years if we stuck to our plan. It was hopeful. Quietly optimistic. I really thought we were on the same page. And then Tyler started coming around. My older brother had always lived in a different orbit. While I stayed local, got my teaching license, and started building a life from the ground up, he moved to San Francisco, dove headfirst into tech consulting, and started stacking cash faster than I could comprehend. He was charming in a way that made people forgive his arrogance, and good-looking enough that no one ever called him out on how little he actually listened when you spoke. He was the kind of guy who made himself the center of gravity in any room, and he knew it. At first, his visits seemed innocent enough. He'd swing through town every couple of months, take us out for dinner, his treat, of course, and regale us with stories of Silicon Valley excess, complaining about his Tesla software like it was a burden to be so cutting edge. Madison would laugh at his jokes, and I'd smile along, even if they were usually at my expense. That was just Tyler. Loud, big, impossible to ignore. But then he started staying longer. A weekend became a week. A week turned into 10 days. He was between projects, he said, taking a breather. And somewhere along the way, the dynamic in our little apartment shifted. I started coming home to find him already there, lounging on the couch, talking to Madison like they'd known each other for years. She brushed it off when I brought it up, said he was just being friendly, that I was overthinking it. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her, for longer than I probably should have. But things changed. Subtly, at first. Madison became quieter around me. More distant. She started taking longer to get ready, wearing lipstick she used to save for special nights, and laughing at Tyler's jokes in a way that sounded different, fuller, more open. I'd walk into the room and feel the air shift, like I'd interrupted something, but I couldn't put my finger on what. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. That Tyler was my brother, and Madison was the woman I was going to marry. That we were just in a rough patch, the kind every couple goes through. But the truth was sitting in plain sight, and I didn't want to look at it. Not until I came home early one Thursday. It had been a short day at school, parent-teacher conferences had been cancelled due to weather. I remember thinking I'd surprise Madison with coffee from that place she liked downtown. I walked in, quietly, and there they were, on the couch, side by side, laughing at something on his phone. Her hand was resting on his knee. She saw me before he did. Her smile dropped so fast it was like someone flipped a switch. Tyler didn't even look guilty. He just leaned back, stretched his arms out like he owned the place, and said, "Ethan, man, didn't expect you back so soon." The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was the familiarity between them. The way they moved, how close they sat, like this wasn't the first time. Like this had been happening right under my nose for who knows how long. Madison didn't try to explain. She didn't cry or deny it. She just stood up, walked past me, and went into the bedroom. Tyler followed a minute later, not saying another word. That night, I slept in my car. The wedding was called off. The apartment lease was in her name, so I left. No fight. No screaming match. Just silence. And that silence lasted years. Until today. Until I walked into that funeral and saw them again. But this time, I wasn't the man sleeping in his car with a shattered heart. This time, I had a different story. And they had to watch it unfold. The night of the dinner is burned into my memory like a scar you forget is there until something brushes against it. It was supposed to be a simple thing, just a few close friends, my mom, and of course, Madison and me. We had gotten engaged a few months earlier, and while we couldn't afford anything extravagant, we wanted to mark the moment with something meaningful. I remember how hard we worked to clean the apartment, how Madison spent hours looking up recipes, and how I ran back and forth from the store 3 separate times because we kept forgetting things. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Homemade lasagna, mismatched wine glasses, candles from the dollar store. It felt warm. Honest. Everyone showed up on time except Tyler. No text, no call. Just radio silence until, nearly an hour into dinner, the front door opened without a knock. He stepped in wearing a tailored charcoal blazer, flashing that practiced smile like he was walking into a boardroom instead of his little brother's apartment. "Hope I didn't miss the toast," he said, tossing his keys on the counter like he owned the place. From that moment, the room tilted. People gravitated toward him like they always did. He had that ability, to control a space just by being in it. He hugged Madison like they were old friends, like he'd known her forever, and said, "Wow, you're even more beautiful than Ethan described," with a tone that made my skin itch. She laughed, a little too hard, brushing her hair behind her ear like she was flattered. I tried not to read into it. I told myself he was just being his usual over-the-top self, and Madison was just being polite. But a small seed had already been planted in the back of my mind, and it would only grow from there. Throughout the night, Tyler hijacked every conversation. When I tried to bring up something from work, a student who'd finally passed a tough exam, he cut in with a story about a $200,000 pitch he'd landed in Singapore. When Madison mentioned a new whitening treatment her office was trying, he leaned in and said, "You know, I could get you into this high-end practice in Palo Alto. They only take clients from the valley. You'd love it." She lit up at the idea, asking questions like it was the first real opportunity she'd ever heard. I sat there, drinking lukewarm wine, watching the dynamic shift with every passing minute. At one point, my mother leaned in while we were clearing dishes. She wasn't dramatic by nature, rarely gave warnings unless she meant them. She kept her voice low, eyes on the table. "Watch your brother," she said, not unkindly. "He doesn't come around unless he wants something." I nodded, more to shut down the conversation than to acknowledge the truth. I didn't want to believe there was something to watch. Tyler had always been the center of attention, and sure, he was careless with people, but I never thought he would cross that kind of line, not with me. Not with Madison. But as the night wore on, the signs began piling up. Madison poured his wine without him asking. She laughed at every joke like she was auditioning for something. When I tried to clean up after dessert, she stayed behind with him in the living room, legs crossed toward him, fingers twirling a strand of hair as he launched into another story about flying private to Miami. They were talking low, close, her posture angled toward him in a way that didn't feel casual. It felt conspiratorial. I told myself I was imagining things. That jealousy was making shadows out of nothing. I had known Madison for years, and I had proposed to her because I trusted her. Because I believed in what we had. But something shifted in her after that night. Subtle changes, quiet ones. She started asking questions about tech, about startup culture. She brought up moving to a bigger city, maybe just for a change, maybe somewhere like California. When I'd push back, remind her about our budget, about our jobs, she'd go silent in that clipped way that meant she was holding back something sharp. And Tyler? He started coming around more. Always unannounced, always acting like it was normal to just drop in on a weekday. He brought gifts, expensive wine, cheese from places I couldn't pronounce. He called Madison by pet names, casually, like it was a joke, but not quite. She never corrected him. I tried to keep things together, to pretend nothing was wrong. I reminded myself that I was building something slow, steady, and real, and that flashiness always burns out. But late at night, when Madison would stay glued to her phone a little too long, or when she'd laugh at texts she didn't show me, that seed my mother planted started to bloom. Something was wrong. Something I didn't want to admit. And that dinner? That was the first fracture in the illusion. The moment the foundation I had poured everything into began to quietly crack beneath my feet. I just didn't know then how deep the fault line ran. The end didn't come with shouting or slam doors the way people like to imagine betrayal does. It came quietly, disguised as an ordinary evening, and that somehow made it worse. Madison was in the shower, the bathroom filled with steam, the sound of running water steady and unremarkable, while I sat on the edge of the bed grading papers and trying to ignore the dull ache that had taken up permanent residence in my chest over the past few weeks. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once. Then again. I wasn't snooping, not at first. I glanced at it the way anyone does when a screen lights up in a dark room, and that was all it took. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible." There was no name attached, just a preview of the message glowing on the screen like it wanted to be seen. My stomach dropped so fast it felt physical, like I'd missed a step on a staircase. I told myself there had to be an explanation, that I was misreading it, that context mattered, but my hand was already moving before my brain could catch up. I picked up the phone. The screen unlocked with a swipe. No passcode. She had never felt the need to hide anything before. What I found unraveled my life in seconds. The message thread stretched back months. Not days. Not weeks. Months. Plans made while I was at work, jokes that didn't need explaining, photos I was never meant to see. Hotel confirmations. "Miss you already. Next time, let's not rush." My name appeared occasionally, not as a partner, but as an obstacle. He's working late, he won't be home until 9, we have time. And then I saw the contact name, and whatever fragile hope I still had collapsed completely. Tyler. My brother. By the time Madison stepped out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her hair, I was sitting perfectly still on the bed, her phone in my hand, my entire body numb. She froze when she saw it. Not shocked. Not confused. Just resigned, like someone realizing a lie had finally reached its expiration date. How long? I asked. My voice didn't sound like it belonged to me. She exhaled slowly and sat down across from me, calm in a way that felt almost cruel. Does it matter? That was the moment something inside me broke cleanly in half. She didn't cry. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try to soften the blow. She told me everything in a flat, detached tone, like she was listing reasons for quitting a job. She said it started after that dinner, that Tyler made her feel seen, that he talked about a future that didn't involve scraping by or waiting years for things to get better. She said she was tired of being scared about money, tired of planning her life around limitations. Tyler had options. Access. Confidence. He made her feel secure. I want more, she said, looking me dead in the eyes. And he can give me that. There was no apology. No remorse. Just honesty, brutal and final. She packed a bag while I sat there, unable to move, unable to process how easily 7 years of my life had been reduced to an inconvenience. When she walked past me toward the door, she didn't hesitate. She didn't look back. The door clicked shut, and the apartment fell silent in a way that felt endless. That was it. No dramatic confrontation. No closure. Just a text message, a confession, and the realization that the two people I trusted most had been building a life together while I was out teaching kids about integrity and loyalty. That night, everything I thought I knew about my past, my family, and my future collapsed into something unrecognizable. And I was left alone in the wreckage, trying to understand how betrayal could feel so quiet and still be so absolute. In the weeks after Madison walked out, I existed in a kind of haze, a dull, gray stretch of time where everything blurred together. I went through the motions of life without actually living it. Waking up felt like a punishment. Teaching felt like performance art, smiling, lecturing, pretending to care about test scores while my own world was crumbling beneath me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My apartment, once filled with the small, comforting rhythms of a shared life, had turned into a mausoleum for memories I didn't want anymore. Her perfume still clung to the sheets. Her coffee mug sat untouched in the cabinet. Every drawer I opened felt like it coughed up some ghost of the future we were supposed to have. I stopped seeing friends. I stopped returning calls. Even my mother's voice, warm and steady over the phone, grated against the rawness I carried in my chest. I wasn't just heartbroken, I was hollowed out. And underneath all that grief was something colder, shame. I had let it happen. I had watched the cracks form and told myself they didn't matter. I had trusted the two people who ended up carving me open from both sides. That kind of betrayal doesn't just hurt, it rewrites you. I didn't know who I was anymore. It got so bad I almost lost my job. I was showing up late, distracted, unable to focus on lesson plans. I remember standing in front of a whiteboard one morning, holding a dry erase marker in my hand, and realizing I had no idea what I'd been talking about for the past 5 minutes. The students just stared at me. No one laughed. No one whispered. They just looked, concerned. What finally forced me to look up from the wreckage was a parent-teacher conference I hadn't wanted to attend. I nearly skipped it. But I dragged myself there out of obligation. I sat across from the mother of one of my sophomores, a quiet kid who barely spoke in class but had a sharp mind. I don't even remember what started the conversation, but at some point, she said, "You're good with them. They listen to you. You don't realize how rare that is." And then she added, almost offhandedly, "Don't let something temporary break something permanent." Those words hit like a gut punch. I went home that night and stared at myself in the mirror for the first time in weeks. Really stared. I looked wrecked. My face was pale, sunken in places, with eyes that didn't recognize themselves. But there was something in them, some flicker I hadn't seen in a while. Not strength exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. I started therapy the next week. It wasn't a miracle fix, but it gave me a place to dump all the poison I'd been carrying. The rage, the grief, the confusion. The shame. I didn't talk about Tyler or Madison at first. I talked about failure. About worth. About not knowing how to trust anyone ever again. My therapist didn't offer easy answers. She asked hard questions. Questions that made me stop deflecting and start examining the way I saw myself. I also started running. I don't even know why. One morning I put on old sneakers and just ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook. It didn't feel good. But it felt something, and that was enough. I ran every day after that, sometimes before sunrise, sometimes late at night when the world was quiet and I didn't have to pretend I was okay. Somewhere in the middle of that chaos, a colleague, Lena, another history teacher, approached me in the staff lounge. She knew I'd been struggling, but she also knew how passionate I used to be. She told me about an idea she had for an educational app, something that could help students connect with history in a more interactive, intuitive way. I almost laughed it off. I was barely getting through my days. But something about the idea stuck with me. It felt like a chance to build something again. Something of my own. We called it History Beacon. It started small. Nights spent coding, writing scripts, designing modules in my tiny apartment with the blinds drawn and the lights low. I poured every bit of pain and energy I had left into that app. If I couldn't erase the betrayal, if I couldn't change what had been done to me, then I would outgrow it. Outbuild it. I would turn the ashes of everything I lost into something no one could take away. The app gained traction faster than we expected. Schools reached out. Students were actually using it. Teachers sent feedback, asking for more features, more content. It was working. Not just the app, but me. I was working again. I was alive again. I didn't stop running. I didn't stop therapy. The wounds were still there, still raw some days. But I had a direction. A purpose. And somewhere deep in that storm of rebuilding, a quiet vow had formed and settled into my bones. They thought they broke me. But I wasn't broken. I was just getting started. 2 years after the night everything collapsed, I found myself sitting across from a lawyer in a sunlit office, signing the final documents that would transfer ownership of History Beacon to an edtech firm out of Boston. The number was surreal, $8.2 million. After taxes, legal fees, and splitting with Lena, I walked away with just over $3 million. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even really smile. I just signed my name, shook a few hands, and stepped out into the parking lot with the same old backpack slung over my shoulder, like it was any other day. I didn't tell many people. My mother knew. Lena, of course. A couple of close friends. But I didn't post about it. I didn't make any grand declarations. I didn't buy a sports car or book a flight to some far-off coast. There was no need to announce anything, especially not to the people who had once made me feel like I had nothing. My silence wasn't humility, it was peace. The first thing I did was pay off my debts. Student loans, credit cards, my mom's lingering medical bills. I bought a house, modest, 2 bedrooms, brick, with a little porch and a backyard big enough to plant something. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't meant to impress anyone. It was quiet, warm, and mine. I kept my job, too. People were confused by that. Colleagues found out eventually and asked me why I still showed up every morning to wrangle teenagers who didn't care about the French Revolution or Reconstruction. But the truth is, teaching was never a backup plan. It was who I was. No amount of money was going to change the satisfaction I felt when a student finally understood something they'd been struggling with, or the small, powerful feeling of watching a kid start to believe in their own voice. That was a kind of wealth I couldn't buy. I started a scholarship fund a few months after the sale. Quietly, anonymously at first. It was for students who wanted to go into education, future teachers, especially those from underfunded communities, who wanted to change the system from the inside. I sat in on interviews, read through personal statements. I cried more than once reading about kids who reminded me of myself, idealistic, stubborn, a little naive, but full of hope. Somewhere in the middle of all this came Elise. She joined the faculty as a special education teacher. She was sharp, empathetic, and didn't take crap from anyone, including me. I liked her from the start, though I didn't realize it. We collided more than we connected at first, 2 very different teaching styles clashing in staff meetings and hallway conversations. But over time, something shifted. It started with small things, her saving me a chair at lunch, me dropping off copies for her class without being asked. Then, long conversations in the parking lot after late meetings. Then dinner. I didn't tell her about the money right away. I didn't want to. I needed to know who she saw when she looked at me, not the developer, not the guy who made it big, but the teacher. The man who still brought home grading to do on weekends and forgot to pack a proper lunch. When I finally told her, she laughed. Not cruelly, just in disbelief. She stared at me for a long time, then said, "You really let me complain about the price of printer ink for 6 months?" And then, more seriously, "You know that doesn't change anything, right?" And it didn't. She loved me for who I was before the success, and maybe that's what made me fall for her so completely. She loved the way I explained historical nuance, the way I lost track of time when I talked about the past, the way I tried to fix everything even when I didn't have to. She never once asked about the app, or the money, or how I spent it. She didn't care about any of that. She cared about me. That kind of love, quiet, consistent, free of conditions, was something I'd never really known. And it showed me that I hadn't just survived what happened to me. I had grown from it. The pain didn't define me. It pushed me to build something lasting. Not out of vengeance, not to prove anything to Tyler or Madison, but because I had something to give, and I finally believed it was worth giving. So I stayed in the classroom. I kept showing up. I built a life that wasn't loud, but full. And in the spaces where betrayal had once hollowed me out, something real took root. Something stronger. The church smelled like old wood and lilies, that thick funeral scent that clings to your skin and makes everything feel heavier than it already is. I hadn't planned on staying long, just enough to be seen, enough to pay my respects without making a scene. But of course, Tyler never did anything quietly. He arrived late, like always, stepping through the main doors as though the place was hosting a gala in his honor. He wore a dark designer suit, sunglasses still on indoors, and right beside him, clinging to his arm like some victory prize, was Madison. They hadn't changed much. Tyler still moved like the room owed him something, and Madison walked like the world was a mirror. Her dress looked expensive, something dramatic and tailored to be noticed, but her eyes were already scanning, looking for a reaction, probably wondering who would be watching, who might still care. I didn't stand up when they entered. I didn't nod. I barely moved. I just sat in the second row beside Elise, my hand in hers, and waited. They made their way down the aisle, Madison's heels clicking against the stone floor like a metronome of arrogance. When she finally noticed me, her expression didn't flinch, just sharpened into something smug. I could see it coming before she even opened her mouth. She leaned in, lowering her voice just enough to keep the moment falsely intimate, like we were still those two people in a shared apartment, arguing over the best way to roast vegetables. "Wow," she said, glancing at Elise with a practiced smirk. "I expected you to end up with someone more impressive." Elise didn't even blink. She turned to Madison, calm and poised, her voice steady and low, but with an edge that cut deeper than raised voices ever could. "You mean someone with less character? Or someone who measures worth by the price tag on a handbag? Because if that's what you mean, then no, I guess I'm not impressive to you." Madison's smile froze, faltered for just a second, but Elise wasn't done. She added, "I've seen what he's been through. What he built from nothing. I love him not because he's flashy, but because he's kind. Honest. Because when life broke him, he didn't break others in return." That silence afterward was thick. Tyler shifted awkwardly beside her, clearly waiting for his turn to play whatever role he thought he was cast in. I looked at both of them then, really looked, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. And maybe a little amusement. I stood, gently pulling Elise with me, and turned toward them. "Madison," I said, my voice louder than necessary, letting it carry a bit, "this is my wife, Elise Chen. She teaches special education, runs a community literacy program, and somehow still makes time to remind me that the world is a better place when you build something real instead of chasing whatever makes the loudest noise." Madison opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. I looked at Tyler then, let my gaze settle on him the way I used to look at a failing student who thought charisma could make up for missing substance. "And since you're both here," I added, "you should also know, I sold my company. History Beacon. It went for $8.2 million. The words hit like a gavel. Tyler's jaw tensed just slightly, a crack in the mask. But it was Madison's face that gave it away. The blood drained from her cheeks, her lips parted but nothing came out. She looked like she had forgotten how to breathe. I wasn't smug. I didn't need to be. That silence said more than gloating ever could. I leaned closer and finished simply, "Turns out being just a teacher pays off." We walked away after that. We didn't wait for a reaction, didn't turn around to watch their faces twist. Elise's hand found mine again, and I felt it anchor me in a way I never thought another person could. That moment wasn't revenge. It was closure, quiet, final, and earned through every night I spent dragging myself out of a hole they dug for me. They expected to see the version of me they left behind. But I didn't come to bury old pain. I came to show them it never owned me. And as I stepped out of that church, I realized I finally felt light. Not because they were gone, but because I no longer carried them with me. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the call. I was sitting in the living room, rocking Lily to sleep against my chest, her tiny fingers curled around the edge of my shirt, the sound of her breathing soft and steady. Elise was in the kitchen humming to herself, trying out a new recipe she'd been excited about for days. The sun filtered through the curtains in long golden streaks, and for a moment, the world felt perfectly still. Then my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to pick it up. It was an old mutual friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time, more Tyler's circle than mine. After a bit of awkward small talk, he cut to the point. You probably don't care, but Madison cheated on Tyler. With some guy in finance. Manhattan money. Bigger fish. She's already gone. I didn't say anything at first. Not because I was shocked, but because I genuinely didn't feel much of anything at all. There was no thrill in hearing it, no secret fist pump, no satisfaction curling at the edge of my mouth. I just looked down at my daughter, still sleeping against me, and thought, of course she did. It was who Madison had always been, chasing comfort, validation, status. The packaging changed, but the hunger stayed the same. And Tyler? I could only imagine the wreckage. The man who once told me I was too soft to keep her had now learned firsthand that you can't buy loyalty from someone who doesn't value it. I thanked him for the call and hung up, sliding my phone across the coffee table like I was done with something far heavier than glass and plastic. Elise looked over at me, curious, and I just shook my head with a small smile. Nothing important, I said, and meant it. Because it wasn't. Not anymore. 6 months earlier, it might have meant something. A year ago, I might have clung to the news like proof that the universe still had rules, that justice circled back around eventually. But now? I didn't need proof. I didn't need karma to make a show of it. I had Elise. I had Lily. I had quiet mornings and warm dinners and an ordinary life filled with things that were real. No pretense. No performance. Just a life built on purpose and love and truth. Elise had met me when I was still rebuilding, before the money, before the headlines. She loved me when I was tired and uncertain, when I was still putting the pieces together and wondering if I ever would. And when Lily was born, everything I thought I understood about love deepened into something indescribable. Holding her, watching her eyes flicker open for the first time, hearing her cry, it reset the world. Suddenly, nothing from the past had teeth anymore. Nothing could touch this. I don't know what Tyler's doing now. I've heard he's keeping a lower profile, trying to salvage whatever's left of his image, working quietly, maybe for once reflecting on the kind of man he became. Madison, last I heard, was on someone else's arm at some gala, her smile wide, her eyes already scanning the room for the next rung on the ladder. I don't hate them. That's the thing. I don't feel anything for them anymore. Whatever we had, whatever history we shared, it's distant now, faded. Like reading a story you once thought was about you, only to realize it was never yours to begin with. I live in the present now. Morning feedings. Story time. Walking through the park with Elise and watching Lily's face light up at the smallest things, a bird, a breeze, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot. These are the moments that define me now. Not betrayal. Not revenge. Just love. Just legacy. They tried to break me. But all they did was set me free. And in the end, I didn't need to prove them wrong. I just needed to live well, honestly, quietly. Because the best revenge, if there ever was any, wasn't success. It was peace. It was waking up every day next to the woman who chose me when I had nothing. It was hearing my daughter laugh from the other room. It was being able to look in the mirror and know I'd never become them. I closed the chapter they wrote me into a long time ago. And now, finally, I'm writing my own.